How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm glad we got to do this.
I know. It's always an excuse to talk about Entourage.
Always good, right? So I guess a little recap. I mean, how we even got here.
Yeah.
We both reached out to the guys, Connolly and Doug. Tell me about how you first started reaching out to the guys and like what brought you to everything.
Well, so it was funny because a year or two ago, there was another guy who was doing an Entourage podcast, a fan podcast named Oh Yeah, Oh Yeah. That was the podcast name. And so I heard that, or I found out about it, and I like emailed him and said, I'm like the biggest female fan of Entourage. I want to talk to you. I want to be one of your guests. I'm also an actor as well, and he was sort of, a lot of his guests were like performers, so that happened. And then Doug Ellin and Kevin Connolly and Kevin Dillon decided to do their own podcast, and I always used to say I was like the biggest female fan of Entourage, but maybe just one of the biggest fans in general. And so they did the podcast, and then I would just kind of tweet, like Instagram comment on the Victory page or on Kevin's page. They started liking them, and then both Doug and Kevin Connolly responded to some of my comments. And so that was really, I was so excited. I remember I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. They're responding. And then eventually I said, look, one of the comments I said, then Connolly messaged me, DM'd me. I think I had already DM'd him after you went on, because I was jealous of you, because I was like, who is this guy who's like the fan that's doing trivia? And so I said, like, I want to challenge Matty Stu. And Kevin Connolly responded, do you really think you could beat him? And I said, yes. And then he responded again after one of my comments, and then we set up a call that ended up not being used, sadly.
Sorry.
But what about you? But the call was awesome. It was so cool to talk to them.
Great guys, and really cool to chat with them. Like for me, I've been in LA for 11 years now, and I never really came out here to act. I was always more passionate about writing and creating and like voiceovers and like producing and things like that. And I kind of just been in the hospitality industry for a while. And I actually, like, quick story, I was actually in Italy and then London when the pandemic hit. And I tell people, like, everyone is like, why would you go? Like, I actually flew the day where everything was fine. And 20 hours later, I landed the one day that everything went like to just complete shit.
Was Italy, the Lombardy thing already had happened, or?
It had been just northern Italy at the time, but it had already been in California. And so I had the trip planned. I'm like, everywhere I'm going is still greenlit. Everything's good. The tours are still greenlit. And then I landed and everything was canceled. I'm stuck in the Vatican. I walk around the Vatican by myself. So it was like, and then I had to get out of Italy and I got to London, and then the travel ban hit, and then I couldn't get to Paris. So I left early. But I did a lot of like thinking while I was over there, just like, as much as I've loved the run I've had with hospitality and achieved a lot and working with some great companies, I need to get back into doing what I really want to do. And then when I came home, everyone had reached out to me, even people I haven't heard from, with, what happened? We saw your Instagram, you were there. And so, like, instead of responding to everyone individually, one night I just wrote like a story of what happened. And and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? And then I ended up kind of like reciting the story and recording it. And then like late night, like almost like a Jerry Maguire moment, releasing it at like 4 a.m. podcast. Here it is. I'm like, and I went to bed. I'm like, and I woke up, I'm like, did I really do that? And then I ended up getting like feedback from people that I wouldn't even expect to get feedback from, all really positive things. Like, hey, that was so cool of you to put yourself out there, to do that. And that was a huge step for me to like get back into that, like, break the barrier of just putting myself out there. Mm-hmm. And so doing that then gave me the motivation of just like, I saw, interacting with Doug on Instagram, and then getting feedback back from him, like, oh, like you said, like he's responding to me, like I'm going to keep going. Yeah. And then, when they started their podcast, I directed all my energy. I started a podcast, and my energy then transformed into getting on the Victory podcast.
Yeah, which you did.
Yeah, which was amazing. But I put all my energy into doing the Instagram videos after their episodes and like calling them out on what they messed up on, and the fact that like Arnold's calves got me on is amazing. But I
Yeah.
actually had like at the time what I thought were friends be like, you know what, you're nuts for doing this, you know, like yada yada, like kind of like not really supporting it. When they said my name on the episode a few times, just kept going and like I didn't stop, and then I got on.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like got the last laugh when all said and done. And when people thought that, you know, I wasn't going to be on, I just kept going. So
Yeah,
it was
basically,
super
that's
cool.
similar to what happened with me. I mean, I didn't do talkbacks or anything about the podcast, but when I had commented to them, and then sometimes they respond, sometimes they wouldn't. And then there was just like this one thing, because it was when the call-ins were happening after your show, after your one, and then I had just commented, and then Connolly actually started following me, and I was very excited.
I
He's
thought,
like my most famous follower, Kevin Connolly. You are
yeah,
my most famous follower. I don't unfollow me, please, because then I really want to be famous followers. Um, and yeah, it was exciting. You know, these are people who, especially being in the industry, you're in the industry, I would say. You know, especially before, when you're a little younger, you don't know as much about the industry. They seem like untouchable, but they're really just people. And then time passes, and and they do other things, and it's sort of, they're just still relatable. And I think that Doug, Ellen, and Connolly and Dillon have all showed us that. And I think the cool thing about what they did during this podcast was like, um, the whole pandemic was so kind of depressing, and it was sort of nice to have, like, with your sort of what happened with you a little bit, like, you told a story and then people responded. Um, yeah, it was just nice to have that go to, you know,
it was like in a moment where, especially like it was great to rewatch Entourage, but to get the podcast and get some behind the scenes stuff from them in a moment when we're kind of stuck with not that much content. We're trying to go back, and those guys have shown us like how amazing they are, and they've been in all different ways inspiration, I think, to both of us. Is kind of like, you know, look at these guys reaching out to us and interacting with us, and that like anything's possible for us if we just keep going. uh,
yeah. And so basically, I don't know if I said this before, but basically what happened was, so that Connolly and I set up like a phone call that was going to likely be used on the show. And then we had the phone call, and then, but they didn't use it. It was like the week before they did sort of the whole one about Kevin's new movie, and Kevin Dillon.
yeah.
And then I said, that we started talking again, and they said, yeah, we want you to take on Matty Stu. I think that would be really funny. So, we figured we'd connect,
I
like this.
remember him calling me and setting that call up, and then we got bumped for what's his face, Josh Duhamel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I understood, but I was trying to tell him, as cool as it'd be to do like trivia, it's more about like I think anyone could really. It's not really about remembering certain lines. It's more about like how the show like affected us in such a positive way, and more of like an appreciation for it. I'd rather like you and I get on and talk to them about like how we viewed certain episodes,
Yeah.
and then get to ask them questions, because like to me, asking Doug those two questions was everything to me, like about Matty and about getting the Martin Scorsese movie. So those were like magical moments for me, and just interacting with the guys. So I think that would be like from a fan's perspective, like trivia, you know, like some of those questions I wish I got right. In hindsight, I probably would if I wasn't so starstruck. But you
Scary
know,
that you got shit from people. Did people like message you,
I got so many DMs, it's insane.
like good or bad?
Mostly really good. A few people kind of like, oh, how'd you get these wrong? And even a few of my buddies, you know, from back home were like, how'd you not get Ethan Suplee? But like, you know, I'm like, you know what? Most of it, I probably was a little just like in the moment, but
That
um,
felt like a trick question, because there was actually a poster that they had made. And I remember, because when Entourage was on, I don't know if you had populated this area at all, but IMDb had message boards for like each show and actor. And so I remember on IMDb, they actually posted the poster, like someone got a screen grab of it. And there was cast members like that they just put in the bottom of, I don't
there, I
think
think.
clear those names. And so I was like, oh, they're talking about one of those people. But no, they were talking about Ethan.
He had them in the clip, but never really made him the co-star. So I was a little thrown off, like when I go back to co-stars events. But you know, I Yeah, I got a lot of DMs, and most of it was really cool, and a lot of people were like, oh, I want to go head to head with you, but like I try explaining, it's not about who remembers more. It's because like I think Entourage, when I look back on it, and when I try explaining to the guys, like it was such a roadmap for my life of like the do's and don'ts. Especially from like a guy's perspective, and like and like growing up similar and wanting similar things, especially like vibing more like to an E, especially I coming out here, I've always vibed to more like the behind the scenes, the management, the producing, like the creating, things like that. So,
Yeah, so I had told them at the end of our call that the show just brought me so much joy, and it just impacted my life in such a positive way. And although there were parts that were dark or whatnot, but it really did just bring me so much joy. And I made sure to tell them that. I think they really appreciated it. And I was looking at the reviews. Sorry, my like charger just popped out. I was looking at the reviews again today on iTunes, and like Doug complains about the negative ones, but there's so many. There's thousands of these reviews that are so positive, and I think it's just like what you can do when you affect people in entertainment. It's so special. And I remember feeling like it was a big guy thing, but finally, but as it got more popular, a lot of girls watched it too. But I remember feeling like it connected me more with men when I was a young woman, that sometimes was like scared to talk to guys, or like wasn't sure, like, oh, I like him, but. And so I feel like a lot of times Entourage, it was sort of, and so I remember it's just kind of nice to celebrate like the friendships and like the nice guys, because even though they were into girls and stuff and wouldn't always talk nicely, like they were just nice guys. And
they all had good hearts.
yeah, and like, and they all wanted the thing, they all just, they were more positive than if it was like a drama, it would have just been so different, like about how the characters were made. And I just remember when I was younger too, like I'd see like a group of guys go by. This actually happened. I'd be like, oh, it's like Entourage. Like which one's like? I'd be like, oh, which one's like Vince or which one's like E? I have a story which I wanted to tell them, but I didn't. Can I tell you?
Wait, yeah.
So this is a true story. I was in college, and I had a bunch of books in my hand. I was like walking down the street. I live in the city, and I went to school in New York City. And I had a bunch of books in my hand, and these guys passed, and one of them, man, he looked like Adrian Grenier. Like he had a Vince look. And I like looked at him like, oh my God, he's so good looking. And then the other guy who was friends with him was like, hey, what's up? Like called to me, and I was like, I was like something like, tell your friend who looks like Vince Chase, I want to talk to him. And so then the guy came, like the one who obviously looked more like Vince Chase than the other guys. And of course, because like if you're a girl at that time and you say that to guys at that time when like it's such a cultural reference, so of course, and we went on a couple dates after that.
Well, anyone's gonna be complimented to be called Vincent Chase, I'm sure, at the time. Yeah, but so it's funny you say that about like the blueprint, because like for me, I remember watching Sex in the City, and I feel like I got this insight. I'm like, oh, is this really how four women in New York City talk and hang out? I'm like, okay, let me take notes in certain these things. And like it's funny because I would see four women walk by. I'm like, I wonder who's the Miranda, who's the Charlotte, who's the Samantha, in the group. So to me, it was very similar parallels of like getting an insight to behind the scenes of just like how, like, no matter what the time is. I know Doug always says this, and yeah, there are things that when I watch the show now, I'm like, that's not very 2020 friendly, but in the end of the day, you get four guys together behind closed doors, they're still going to say some things that maybe if they were recorded wouldn't sound great, just as if you got four girls around. It's just a perspective, I think.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. And actually, it was funny because did you listen to the David Franco episode?
Yeah.
And so he was talking about like Sex in the City and directing some of those episodes, and then coming over to Entourage, and
pretty vulgar, X-rated, conversations. Like I think I learned, more outside the box things from Sex and the City than I did from Entourage. But
they both sort of served, their purposes. Oh, well, the one thing I was going to say is I remember, so when I was in the end of college and right after, I actually interned like at a talent agency, much smaller agency, not like a CAA or what Miller Gold was based off of, but And I remember watching one of the Ari episodes when he was the phones were ringing, and he was like screaming about the people answering the phones. And I remember when I was the intern or the assistant, I said, "Oh my God, this is so much more real now." Because these had already come out. So I was rewatching them. I said, "Oh my God, this is so true." Actually, it could have potentially been when it came out. And then I rewatched the episodes again because it had been so long since I watched some of the later seasons. And I said, "Oh, this is the one that really reminded me of." I think it was obviously a fantasy, but there was some truth about acting and like film and being in the business.
Totally. I mean, I've worked for some high-end profile restaurants and nightclubs and in Los Angeles, and like I said on the podcast, it's a rewatch when you live in LA and understand the venues more, and when you see some of these celebrities come in and how they're treated and the way it goes, it really is like some of the things that they portrayed Vince doing and living wasn't so far-fetched. Like I think it gave a real insight to how a Hollywood lifestyle is for an A-lister and his entourage crew around him.
Actually, you know what's funny? So I actually had a friend who worked at Abrams, which is now A3 agency. And when I went to LA, because I was in LA for a few weeks in 2019, we were talking, and he loved Entourage too. And we were talking about Entourage, and we are like, "Who's Vince?" We said one of the things that I feel like feels different today is that, does Vince Chase type exist? And there's the Leo, and there's like Ben Affleck. But like the people who are young today, like, is anyone actually like that? Like, because it's so kind of spread out now on all the different platforms and all the different networks. I was thinking, like, I don't know. It's different.
Yeah,
It's
I don't know
different, right?
who I would consider your Leo of today, so to speak, because I consider like Vince and Leo kind of parallel. And I think especially in a reboot, he brings that Leo philanthropist, environmentalist thing back. That's very parallel to Adrian Grenier.
Yeah.
I don't know, like in today, I think you're right. Like the streaming and the platforming, it's made it so like you're loyal to certain more platforms. Like some people just dive into Netflix, some people just dive into different platforms and HBO Max now. So
The
it's
closest person I could come to is like, I'm gonna say his name wrong, I think, but Noah Centineo. Do you know who that is? He was in Netflix, big movie on Netflix about the girl, the All the Boys I Loved Before, I think.
okay.
I was like, maybe? Like, he's sort of a star on the rise. He's good looking. He's young. Like,
I
but
mean,
I don't know. It's
yeah,
different. Like, it's so just, it's not even like Chris Hemsworth because he's older. Like,
Ryan
they really
Gosling,
did so well.
I mean,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know. Is that
Yeah.
him, or is it maybe we're drawing a blank on someone, but
Yeah.
there's it's different. You don't have
Yeah.
that.
So much content. So it's harder to like, there's a lot of stars, but it's harder to like have like who it people, it seems like almost a thing of the past. I don't know, even though there is like Zendaya, I guess, is sort of like the it girl right now.
It's
But
just evolved and changed so much. I think that the amount of scripts out there now is way more than it was back then. I mean, the amount of studios now, people putting out content. So I think there's just so many more opportunities, which is great for people like us trying to get out there. And it's cool like to see Kevin do Action Park Media and to see like maybe how that evolves and whatnot.
yeah, no, it's exciting. The podcast arena is like more, I feel like there's a lot of it's funny because everyone used to listen to radio shows before TV. And so I was thinking sort of almost like a full circle back. But yeah, it's kind of this newer, it's not super new now, but it's sort of this new arena. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's exciting.
What are your favorite things about the Victory podcast? Because I mean, it's been really cool listening to that and like to get like the behind the scenes. Like, what are some of your things that you've been like, oh wow, like that have like made you kind of pause to hear?
I was thinking about that today. There was a couple of things. One was I loved the episode where they talked about when they went to Golden Globe shows and Emmy shows. Do you remember? It was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was like just Kevin Connolly had stories up the wazoo about just who like coming over to him. It was so funny and it so captured. It was so captured the sort of chemistry between the cast, and it was just hilarious. I also really liked Jeremy Piven's episode.
Jeremy Piven was cool. It was funny when he said about trying to take credit for you too, because they had said it like 2 or 3 previous episodes, and Piven will try to take credit for you too. And then he came on and tried to take credit, and I was dying laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
And
good.
Rexy, I was so happy he came on because
Yeah.
he was So funny. And also like Emmanuel Shrieky.
I mean, she sat there and her first episode, and she's like, I don't want the guys at home to like, like when they all thought she was like this, an amazing super, girlfriend. And she goes, I really just sit at my house and, in my chips and smoke weed. I'm like, you're not helping your cause. You're just increasing everyone's love for you right now. Like all you're doing is like making people forget about Sloan and love Emmanuel now. So.
You remember that? Because she said she wanted to, this was sort of what she would have probably done today if it was out now, but she said that she wanted to do sort of like a real Sloan, where she was just like eating chips on the couch.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like,
great.
I'm in love with that even more. So.
I loved one thing. I loved that. Well, there was a couple things. One, that they said they drink grappuccinos, like beers, like they were shooting beers with the grips. Is thinking about the cast of this show, like drinking beers on like a Friday night, Saturday morning, otherwise known in the industry as a Fraturday, when you're shooting until like early on a Saturday morning. It's so funny. And also when they talked about like getting called out on the street, people still coming up to them. It's crazy that people still say anything to them.
The Rappuccinos makes me go back to certain episodes. I'm like, were they a little buzzed there? Like, where did that attitude really come from? But the two things that really stood out were when Doug said about Ari meeting with Terrence McEwick at the bat mitzvah, and when Terrence handed him that $50,000 check, I mean, I had a bar mitzvah. I got I never got $50,000, but I got good checks and stocks and whatnot. So I just figured that they're very close and really, he's very wealthy, and so he was just giving him a really good gift.
Oh, you never? I always got that.
I mean, I thought that it was coming no matter what, but I thought like, I'm going to give you a nice gift because I'm going to take your client, but not like full force. Like I thought he was getting that $50,000 no matter what. But I thought like for Doug to say that he really meant as a subliminal message, that was cool.
Yeah.
And James Cameron, that he was going to make Aquaman a bust, but then James Cameron wrote him a letter and said, you can't make my movie a bust. Like I want to read that letter so bad because like Cameron doesn't make bombs. So you can't make my movie a bomb.
That was the other thing I loved was when, and I mentioned this in one of the comments to them, when Connolly told about his audition for Avatar. Yeah. And it was such a great story. It was such a horrible, it was such a sort of this mix of when you're an actor, it's really just captures the crazy of the industry so well, the podcast. Yeah, I loved when Doug talked about how with Rob Weiss, how that was how he got on, was because they were friends forever, which I sort of knew, but like it was really nice to hear that he thought of Rob Weiss to like, that he knew him he had this movie that was good, and he had known him, and that they were sort of friends from childhood. That's such a nice story, because I don't know, that's just awesome. Like to think that someone who ends up having a hit show would contact their good friend from growing up. And
yeah. Now, like for me, I tell people that Entourage is almost like therapeutic, and it's like almost like it's a go-to for so many things on different levels of emotions. And certain episodes will trigger me to like want to put on. Like, do you feel like, obviously we watched it in the beginning, but like you obviously rewatch it a ton. I can put it on in the background for many things, but like for you, what's like some of like the, I got to put Entourage on right now. Like, what kind of like inspires you to do that, like good or bad?
Well, I, for a long time, watched the pilot, like, I don't like every 2 years. Like, I just feel like I watched the pilot so many times, like for just to relax, to chill, because it's so funny. The other thing is there's so much dark content on, and I like hour-long dramas, but they're like hard to take in sometimes. So it's nice to watch something quick that has just guaranteed laughs that but and also just a couple of my favorite. Well, I guess we were gonna say favorite episodes, right?
Well, yeah, we could definitely get into favorite episodes, yeah. But like, and there's moments that like for me, I go back though, like, from the years in between when it came out into now in Victory, like going through certain breakups, I remember like, all right, let me sit down and put this season of Entourage on. Like if Vince can come back, then I can come back from this kind of thing. Or like dealing with like certain jobs and like seeing like E's transformation and Ari's like, when Ari thought like he was at the bottom driving home from Lloyd's car, the prop car from Fast and the Furious, like, and thinking on the bottom, and how he rose to the top and ended up buying Terrence's company. So
Yeah, I think it's a great story of sort of ways to
any
come.
guy who's been cheated on, that moment with E going to that perfect 10, I'd rather been with you last night, but instead I got drunk and put the perfect 10 on. Like any guy who's had their heart broken puts that episode on, he's like, yeah, all right, I'll be okay.
I love that. I love that episode, and I loved that line for so long. That was like
Oh,
my favorite line.
Yeah.
When he's like, "Oh no, what was my favorite?" I shouldn't say this. I should not say this. Was when she was like, I was never with a guy who didn't want to fuck me again in the morning."
Oh yeah, I mean that right there, like, and then
That for
on
so
the
long.
podcast when they talked how there's no way Eve fucked her again in the morning, like no, Eve fucked her again in the morning.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Kevin Connolly sort of thought he did, right?
Yeah, I think Kylie thought he did. I mean, like all inclination in that scene, they phone down, she went in, and they did not look like nothing was stopping. So yeah, I left it at that. But that was like a birth moment of E too.
Right.
Like that was a huge moment of his character, a transformation of his character, where like you were kind of up until then, like kind of like even Connolly says this now, like, is he kind of like a pussy? And then he does that, and you're like, oh no, like he's very faithful and loyal. He's emotional, and like I related to that a lot. And but to see him like stand up for himself and do that, and even like, yeah, it's not cool to cheat on someone, but like his inclination was right, and it ended up working out. So
It's sort of like in Sex and the City. They're all sort of almost like the parts of personality of the same person, right? So like they all kind of make up like the same,
they do.
like various different. So the foils of each other are in some ways all you. I love the Sundance episode so much because I love to watch that one. That's one of my favorites. That, and I think the one we were just talking about, My Maserati Does 185.
Yeah.
These are my two favorite episodes. The Dom episodes, and I never really hated him. Like a lot of people hated him. He was a little annoying, but like I never hated him.
People only hated him, and at the time, I can agree, I was disliking Dom because he derailed. Where you're like, oh wait, Vinny like got everything, and then Dom comes in and like, no, I want it to keep going, but they needed a little derailment, and it worked out, and he was a good character in the end. And now I rewatch it and I appreciate it a little bit more.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do you think Adrian Grenier won't come on the podcast?
I really think that he really is just in a different mental place, in a good way. I think like I follow him, and I followed him for a very long time, and he seems really in a good place of like focusing on the environment, making himself more in tune with being an artist, seeing him quote poetry, seeing him just in tune. I think that a part of him is kind of moved on from that Vincent Chase character. He probably more than maybe like Ari too, but like he probably gets called so much walking down the street, Vinny Chase, and he's probably typecasted like no other. And he's probably like, in a way, I guess they're all typecasted in a way, but I think he's really typecasted. And he's probably just accepted like, I've done well for myself. I'm focused on these things right now. And I don't think that he's in a place of going back. I don't think it's anything against the guys. I think if like Doug was like, hey, come over for dinner behind no recording and like have a dinner with all the guys, I think he would be down for that. I think he just doesn't want to go back and talk about being Vinny Chase. He wants to go on and talk about what's important to him and saving the environment and being an artist and a philanthropist. And I respect that.
Yeah, I think two things. I think one is I think he is actually really different than Vince Chase. If I'm like picking up on his actual persona at all from what I see online and what I've seen over the years, one. And so being an actor, and you're playing an actor who's wildly successful, more so sadly than you, must be difficult. It's sort of this meta experience of like this character that I played got to work with Martin Scorsese, this character that I played got to work with James Cameron. And I wondered that too, if it was sort of this, if it was difficult for him after the show, because it was like, I'm an actor, but I'm not Vince Chase, who I've been playing.
It's a great point. I thought that too. Like, for him, it probably was the biggest transformation of back to real life. Like, wait a sec. Like, I went from being, like when they went out and they were filming Turtle, Drama, and E are in the background, it's him walking out the red carpet. It's always him in the spotlight. And yeah, Adrian Grenier he's a very talented actor for sure, but he's not, an A-list like a Leo or Brad Pitt. And even those guys, there's not many of those out there. So it's hard to, I imagine, to get back into the real world. But I think he's just very opposite of Vincent Chase as well.
Where are you from? Are you from New York or?
So I'm originally in New York. My family is from the East Coast. I was born in the city, and then I actually lived in Dallas for a few years. My dad's in apparel and fashion. So Dallas for a few years, and then back to the suburbs of Philly,
Okay.
when my dad was commuting to New York, and then I was there from 13 to 24, where I put my stuff in a truck with my ex-girlfriend, put a Mustang attached on the back of a U-Haul, and drove across country, and 24, and I've been out here since, and I'll be 35 in a week. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I am. I live in the city still. I'm from Long Island, similar to, that's one of the things, and I live in Brooklyn now, and that's one of the things that we talked about when I talked to them, because I think it does, like, I mean, everyone from everywhere liked it, but I think that the show, I think, speaks to Yorkers in a way that's sort of this, and it's sort of the podcast too, because it was funny because suddenly Doug and Kevin Connolly, because Dylan's a little more like he doesn't do the whole like competition thing as much, really. He's more like the nice guy. People were saying apparently to Kevin Connolly that he was being too mean to Doug, and I was like, is it just because I'm from Long Island? But he doesn't seem that mean.
I just thought that was normal talk. Yeah.
It
I just
sounds
think
like
people
my
from LA and the Midwest who aren't used to that.
This sounds, yeah, like, and it's funny because we were talking about the boy and girl thing, sort of coming at it from like a female and male perspective. I was watching it again recently, kind of binging on some of it, and I thought that it really sounded like me and my girlfriends, even though they were guys. There was a couple of things that there was a few, just the back and forth between them was sort of like me and my friend, which kind of goes to show you how good it was. Because if I mean, yeah, not necessarily talking about like having sex with a lot of women. We weren't talking about that.
You sub a few words out, and you're like, oh, I can relate to those conversations. But let me ask this,
and I think it speaks to this sort of like the success of the show was sort of able to cross over demographics and whatnot.
For me, I had so much like respect and I mean, I thought like some of the female characters in the show were amazing. I mean, Maina Daniels, she was so sexy, so awesome, like powerful, and like Dana Goren was so great and had great witty lines, and you just had so much respect for her and the way she handled herself. Mrs. Ari was so cool. I mean, so they had some really amazing. I mean, Sloane. I mean, they had really strong-willed women that were great characters that like I related to, and some of my guy friends related to so well. Like, but how was that like for you? Because I mean, that was like, this is like early on, and this isn't a very alpha male show, but they brought in these very strong-willed women characters as well.
I remember like always really liking Mrs. Ari, and I think that she was a really good counterpart for Jeremy Piven, Perry Reeves. I thought that
they had great chemistry.
Yeah, they were great. She was hilarious. She was really dry, kind of compared to him. And yeah, and Sloane, they were all very likable. Even though they were all in sort of different arenas, they were all just very likable, and they were all very like women who you could look up to, sort of, who had a success in one way or another, like characters, the actresses too, obviously. But yeah, and there was a lot of women in the show. I mean, obviously a lot of the women were people who they were dating, and that's maybe for that episode. But yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, it played differently today probably, but I was actually thinking about that, and they keep talking about this potential reboot. And I was wondering how it could work. I don't know. I had a couple ideas.
Give me some thoughts. I had a few too, so we can.
I kind of thought that Vince should, if they take this and it makes money, I get like 10%. But I thought that it would be nice if Vince and Eric sort of made a production company like Reese Witherspoon.
Oh.
And then they were producing. He was in it still. He was like in the shows or the movies, because it'd probably be some TV now. And then they were producing stuff, and they were like making content, and that would bring in the other people. That would bring in like the other ethnicities and the women and like whoever. And I think that but I think it could partner well with what they've been talking about, which is like how do they navigate the landscape, or do the characters have children? I thought that was really interesting because like Jerry and Eric, Kevin Connolly do. Um, so that was sort of what I was thinking, that they would sort of have created uh, an avenue for other stories to be told within the Entourage universe. I don't know. Maybe that's too meta, but
No, I like that. I thought something similar like that for Kevin Conley, like parallel to how he's got Action Park Media, but like a production company, and having that the management company pivot. My thought for Vince was, and just to try to get Adrian on, was like, hey, you can kind of play in some ways yourself right now. This guy who has had a lot of success, who's like kind of like Leo. Like Leo picks his movies at this point. He works with only the A-listers, however he wants, but otherwise he's being a philanthropist. He's focused on the environment, and I think like if Vince is the kind of guy who would make ocean documentaries, planet and like environmentalist documentaries. And I think that parallels well. So you're like, hey Adrian, you can kind of just be who you are right now, and just but bring that same message on for the reboot. I thought that might attract him onto it
that's
as well.
funny. That's funny. I didn't think of that. That would be a good idea. Also, maybe he could start. Maybe he could have like found that vegan girl again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, they date in real life, which is cool to hear. But like someone like,
Oh yeah, those are the
yeah,
fun things about the podcast. Is like
yeah, and Val Kilmer was trying to date her. That was cool to hear.
it sounds like such a wild ride. More, I mean, you kind of knew it already, but hearing the actual stories, it says, "Wow, this is just such a wild ride." I mean, to make any show, really, but
A few things like they've talked about um, that would be cool to see them kind of rectify in the reboot is like, they talk about the movie and like how they wish it had more success. And I think like for someone like me, I could watch the movie 100 times and still be happy because it's extra entourage. But
yeah,
it didn't. There was a few things that like it didn't translate from the ending, which I thought was the best series finale. I can't think of a better series finale. It gave me everything I wanted. And then it gave you the little teaser at the end with Ari in Italy, so it set it up for a reboot or another movie. And they didn't keep Turtle with Don Pepe's. Turtle never made enough money from the series finale to then make a house in Malibu next to Spielberg. The money, a few million didn't translate to that. I know that. So and there was like a few things that I wish they was more of a Vince struggle, could have been better in the movie. But I think that they can go back and like take things from the movie, take things from the series finale, blend them, and do a really cool reboot that I think HBO Max should be interested in, because you still have, you bring the Dana Gordons in, you bring the Maine Daniels, maybe Ari owns a football team now that the Chargers and the Rams are out here. They use a minority owner or something.
that would be funny.
That, that'd be cool. So,
Yeah, and no, I think there's definitely room for it. I think
Uncle
it's
Drama, Uncle Turtle with babysitting Sloan and E's kid would be really cool.
yes, because you heard when Kevin Conlon was said that they would have a 5-year-old. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that. I think it takes a lot to like remount anything, but obviously there's people who really like this story and these characters, and the podcast. Yeah, I guess a lot of, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of podcasts about shows, but I think this is certainly one of the more successful ones. I don't know that how many showrunners are coming back and doing podcasts about their shows.
I think a lot are, but this
Really nice
show
of
has
them.
such a loyal fan base and it's so much heart to it that I think it's brought a lot of us out. And like for us to connect, cross country and have this love for Entourage, this connection, just shows the
I
like
would be a mess.
impact it's writing, like and like how much like it's meant. Like I tell people like as far as impacts my life, like my father, and then a few historical figures, some athletes I look up to, and Doug Ellin, because his writing was such a blueprint. Like watching E and how those guys interacted was such a blueprint for my life, some do's and don'ts.
I'm really excited to see what he does with this soccer show that he's working on. That sounds really fun.
Super
Um,
delayed, probably. I mean, he's probably supposed to be in London at this point, but with the lockdown and everything. But so let me ask you this: who are your favorite Entourage characters? Male, female, doesn't matter. Just who are your favorite characters?
Honestly, with all the 5 of them, I was thinking about this. I really think it often just switched. I mean, I don't know that I ever had like a one favorite. I think it kind of depended on what was happening in the story, in the show, like with the arcs. Sometimes sometimes it'd be Vince, sometimes it'd be, drama or Turtle. And I think that like they each sort of had their moments to shine, including Ari. Um, and I really liked all of them. I don't know that I had like a favorite.
I loved all of them. I think that I was always attracted to Ari's drive and passion for success, and E's, emotion and love and care. So I always found myself a blend between those two, not as hard as Ari, but not as kind of soft as E.
Yeah.
So I always kind of vibe to those two. I loved Mrs. Ari, like you said. I thought she was a great compliment to how those two, how that relationship played. To see this power, king of Hollywood, and behind closed doors, how he how he was with his wife was really cool to see.
Right.
And so I like that, and to hear that it's a lot of parallels between Doug's life and the therapy sessions. That was really cool because I was wondering where all that came from. So that was cool to hear on the podcast.
That first therapy session with like, do you want to be in a mansion in the Agora fucking Hills? It really, like, he says that everyone loves that monologue. It's so great.
Well, my first year out here, my ex-girlfriend got into Pepperdine grad school. I was living out in Calabasas, working in Agora Hills. And now I live, between Sunset and Santa Monica Boulevard off of Fairfax. And now I can really appreciate that. Like, do you want a Beverly Hills mansion or live in Agora Hills? Like, I understand that so well. And when you're living in, the East Coast and you've never heard of Agora Hills, you're like, huh, what is that? You laugh. It's not the same. You kind of get it, but like, when you live out here, it is such a different rewatch. And like, drama about Malibu, you're like, when you live in the East Coast, you're like, huh? When you live in LA, you're like, oh, I get it. It's funny.
Well, that was also funny because I wasn't as much like in the industry when I was watching when I was younger, and then I was rewatching some of the episodes that I don't rewatch as much, like the later seasons, and I was rewatching the Mushroom, the where they go the George,
Yeah.
And it was like, once you're in the industry, to think about going and doing mushrooms with Eric Roberts is actually like the funniest thing ever. And I don't know that you would have ever realized how funny it was if you weren't really like actually like if you hadn't worked in film. It's so funny, and it was funny then but it's even more funny now. I mean, I was into acting before, and I had already done a good amount of acting. I'd studied acting, I had done acting in school and whatnot, and I was already planning on studying like theater in college when Entourage came out. But I don't know, I feel like I feel like it kind of made people want to be in the film industry. Like, I talked to one of my friends, Jake, about this. I said, it's sort of, it was like, it's different though. It's certainly not Vince's journey for most of us, but like, I think that it did. I think that it inspired a lot of people to just to take a chance.
I think it also showed we don't all have to take Vince's journey. That we can take a path of E, a path of drama, a path of Turtle, and all find different levels of success. Mm-hmm. And it's all about that brotherhood, that camaraderie. Their real success was the love for each other. And
that was what I was going to bring up. Avion, remember tequila, because wasn't it Doug's friend's tequila? I swear it was someone's
Avion, well, Ken Austin, they know Ken Austin. Knows Ken Austin, but like Avion, I mean, like
I used to do liquor promotion.
My story with Dillon with the Avion, like I remember like running a bar and be like, where's the Avion? I gotta get Avion. They're like, all right, I'll get you as soon as it comes in. And then I was so obsessed of having it. And then when you walked in, I was like, oh, ultimate moment.
Yeah, no, it was because I did liquor promotions for a long time, and I remember quite a few times doing Avion, like especially in early 2010s, and everyone said, "Oh yeah," like people would definitely like relate it to Entourage or to Turtle. Yeah, it just again, it shows how much like a cultural, and that's the other thing is I was thinking about how it really was sort of this cultural phenomenon like other shows. But I was thinking, like, today, is there a show that's sort of the bedrock for so many people? And just because there's so much content, it's almost like no.
There's so much content. I think there's shows that like, the generation after loved, but not like that had such a social impact. Like I think before us, I think of Seinfeld. And I could watch Seinfeld over and over. And I think we got a lot of one-liners and social commentary from Seinfeld. But Entourage and like in Sex and the City, like the way those two shows impacted, just how groups of friends will view and how, I know plenty of guys sit around and watch Sex and the City and plenty of girls will watch Entourage and vice versa. So I think being able to watch those shows, like especially like Entourage was so impactful and so timeless. It really was.
Speaking of which, I think they may have mentioned this on the pod, but like, Sopranos just did a movie. Did you know that?
Well, I thought they were doing a reboot, a prequel, is what I thought.
Yes, it was a prequel.
Yeah, I mean, Sopranos, I think was such an amazing show. And I put that right up there with like that era of like amazingness of HBO, like when Entourage and Sopranos and Sex and City and just 6 Feet Under, some great shows.
There should be no reason why they don't.
Well, the James Gandolfini,
No, I mean the prequel. That's why, because
prequel makes
the
perfect
Entourage.
sense.
There should be no reason why HBO wouldn't, and especially if they kind of commit to like taking into consideration what's happening today. But
we could always do a prequel. I mean, who wouldn't want to see the boys back in high school? They always talk about being in New York, and like you don't have to get. It's not the same as not those 4 guys.
Oh,
do like a Saved by the Bell thing where it's like they do a prequel.
that was what I was gonna say. Is that they should have it in New York. They're so busy in New York now with shows that it would be entirely possible that they could come here and do a bunch of shows here. Like Shonda Rhimes just had a show over here, and there's a ton of I mean, even though COVID's a little slower, but even with, I mean, also, did I tell you about this is so, do you watch Succession?
Oh yeah, I love Succession.
I have a weird crossover idea. I want to hear it.
Oh, please.
So you know how Logan, who's like, for anyone who doesn't know, the patriarch of a very dysfunctional, very rich family, always calls the president like the shrunken California raisin. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So Johnny Drama became president. And that's a Succession Entourage crossover.
That's very like the raisin. I like that. That's very good.
When Logan says the shrunken California raisin, he's speaking of Johnny Drama.
Yeah, I like that. That's funny.
It's like, Johnny Drama 2020, 2016.
He make it. Drama could run for president. He'd make a very interesting candidate. So why not? Or a governor at least. A governor or mayor for sure. I could see that.
Governor, yeah.
Oh.
But it's also interesting today because I was thinking about how it's almost like the content that's light and comedic is still kind of dark, at least before COVID. I think COVID may change it a little bit. So it's like, I think it's a good time for like lighter shows to come back, because I think there's going to be more of a demand for that, because there was such as like ultra darkness before COVID in the content.
We went through this period of cancel culture, and I get certain things. Absolutely, I get certain things are a little far. I don't think we should archive Twitter feeds from people from 10 years ago and cancel their current shows based on that. I think that we went a little far across the board, and that created what we were putting out there. Comedy really should have very few limits. There are, and I think like Dave Chappelle says the best, like, I'm going to say things. If you don't like what I say, don't listen to me. Turn me off. There's plenty of things on Netflix to watch. Just don't watch me. I'm going to say what I want to say. If people don't want to watch a reboot of Entourage, they don't have to watch a reboot of Entourage. Doug and those guys should make it for the fans and not worry about all the people that want to watch other shows. And there's something for everyone out there.
That's one of the good things too about today is that it's so diverse, and that and there's so much. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think there's almost something for everyone. I don't know. I mean, it'll be exciting. We'll have to see what happens. But I think the podcast, someone was saying, asking in my Facebook, someone who I've worked with was saying, what made you happy this year? He asked entertainment wise. And I said, one thing I said was Victory, the podcast, because I think it was really nice of them to like do it during the pandemic. I think it was just really well-minded.
And how interactive they made it with us. I mean, for us to have conversations with them and like really like during such a crazy tumultuous time like that, for sure was my, like having those interactions and like being able to talk to those guys has been like such a kick in the butt for me, and a great like little revamp.
Yeah, it was so fun. It was so fun. Yeah, I think like trivia, I remember when I was talking to Connolly about it, I said, are you going to ask trivia or is it going to be like a conversation? Because I was like watching all these Entourage episodes, as I said. But yeah, like trivia could be fun. But yeah, just talking, I think they can tell how much it's been. But I think it's nice to get two different perspectives. I think, because when the people called in for the fan podcast, there was only like one woman. And that was one of the things I said that got them to talk about having a call with me. But I think there's a lot of women who really like the show, including my friends, including friends of mine. And, I think that the audience is diverse. And I think,
I think
it's just, it really, and, it's funny because my aunt liked it, and my mom liked it. I think so many, it really, a lot of different age groups and genders and whatnot.
I think it speaks to so many different audiences, and you know, like the trivia could always be fun, but it's not really about who remembered more. It's like, I think it's about how the story impacted us, and like why we rewatch it so much and why it's affected us so much. And like, that's what I like was trying to tell the guys, like, have me on with 4 or 5 other big fans that like have different perspectives, and let us come up with cool questions for them. It's like fan questions that I think the world wants to know. Like, I think a lot of people want to know why Medellin was a bust. I think that was cool here.
It made sense to me after Doug said that he wanted Aquaman to bomb, because I thought that too, especially rewatching it. And I said, oh, so he wanted Aquaman to bomb, but then James Cameron said the letter. So I said it was always sort of in the plan, the sort of, I'm assuming they had a show Bible, which is sort of an arc, a sort of, for those who don't know, it's sort of a outline of what's going to happen in the show. And a lot of showrunners have what's going to happen at the end, at the beginning, so they know where they're going, and the relationships between the characters. So I said, oh, so it was always sort of an idea to have one of the major shows, the movies, bomb. And so I think that's why Medellin did, was because he wanted to do it with Aquaman, but then that didn't end up working out. So that's why I thought.
Yeah. I would love to see what, his book, what it originally was, because it seems like he didn't have too much of a plan, but he had to have somewhat of a plan. So I really love to sit down with Doug specifically and like pick his brain on like what really was the original plan with Vince. Because if you were supposed to have Aquaman bomb and Medellin be a success, give us the original outline on that. It would be really cool.
Yeah, you know what? I sort of thought, I know that they had some idea of what they wanted to happen with the characters in the plot line. So he says that the original pilot was kind of darker. Didn't he say that? And that he wanted to do a read of it?
Originally, Dom was going to be Vinny, and it was going to be more based on Mark Wahlberg and less,
right.
comedic. And then Doug made it more about like how he can relate to like his, upbringing.
Yeah. So I think, from what I gather, I think they had sort of wanted it to be a little darker, and then HBO was sort of saying, make it more funny, which is what got everyone interested. And then what happened was they sort of were able to experiment more with like the darker nature, and which is sort of, I think, what they wanted to originally. This is all just, this is my ideas from what they've said on the podcast and how I've watched the show. And that's why sort of in later seasons it got a little darker, because it kind of did, the whole Vince drug season. But the Medellin, I mean, that whole debacle and sort of shooting it and all of like the trial and error that went into, it was like there was always a problem, and then there was always a problem that was always solved, which was also nice about the show, was it's sort of problem solving.
And it gave like real problems that like if you are get a taste of the industry, you can relate to, and can see like they were very realistic issues they dealt with, like rewrites and things like that. And it was cool to see movies getting shut down, like Smoke Jumpers. It was cool to see like how they really gave you a taste of everything. So you had, obviously Entourage was epic, and you had all these great characters, but you had some like really cool faces come on. Like for you, what were like the faces, like the cameos that you're like, oh my God, that was so cool? Or like the episodes you look back were like John Stamos coming in, or where you look back and like, those are some really cool cameos.
I really was excited when Scarlett Johansson came on, and I thought that they like worked it in an interesting way. I liked with the Bob Saget was hilarious, and Vince not knowing who it was so great. And I liked, Larry David. That was one of my favorites. I loved that Ari represented Larry David. I rewatched the episode that had the Kanye cameo, which was also fun. Yeah,
that was good. Yeah,
there was a lot of fun ones.
The Brady one was my favorite.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit series Tom. Same network as the Super Bowl. Ever hear of TiVo? Like that's one of my favorite drama lines.
Yeah.
How Turtle is with Brady, and he ends up inviting him over to dinner. Like that was really cool how they got him to do that. And then obviously James Cameron, when he was talking about how Kevin Arnold said he was going to be governor, and then Scorsese just calling Vince was really cool.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear more about, because they've sort of mentioned it, but I'm interested to hear more about how that happened.
He just said, he asked Mark to call Martin Scorsese, and Marty said, yeah, which is like, he said it so casually, which is like so cool.
There's
gotta be more to it than that.
Had they already done The Departed?
I think that at that point, The Departed had already been filmed.
Yeah.
Like they had just filmed it at that time. So, and that was super cool. And then obviously, U2 was awesome to hear that story. Like, cause I always wondered, how do they pull that off? Cause that wasn't like, they didn't fake that. They need to do that at a concert.
That was the other thing I was shocked about was they said, I had no idea. They said that they actually went to these places. Like they went to the games. Like I was
Yeah, you have to. I mean, there's no way you're faking a Laker game or a U2 concert.
It's just unbelievable. Like if you know anything about, making TV, like you're just like, holy fuck. Like I can't. I mean, it was brave.
Doug's been sneaking the cameras into the Staples Center and like not sure if they got the right shot, but like that shot was so epic, that reaction to hear that it's a natural reaction, because they weren't sure if they'd really